Welcome to my session, Configuration Management Theory in Practice. It's more or less the same session that we've given at the DrupalCon in Dublin a couple of months ago. So if you've seen that one, then this one will be nothing new, but you're still welcome to stay, of course. Also, I'm presenting it alone, and there we were three, so I will focus a little bit more on the parts that I worked on most and that are more dear to me. But feel free to ask questions about the whole presentation, or the whole topic in general, actually. It's my favorite Drupal 8 topic, and I can speak about this for hours and hours. Now we have just 45 minutes, so I will try to fit as much in it as possible, but not too much so that you couldn't follow anymore. So if I'm going too fast, then feel free to make a sign, and I will repeat the point that I just made. The session is in a couple of different like problem spaces. So look, there's things that you can do with Drupal and things that you can do with Drupal plus some contrib modules. And I will introduce them one after the other. I'm Fabian. I work for Mutable, and you can find us online. We work in a distributed team in Italy, Belgium, and here in Prague. And we therefore have the need to communicate well and make sure that the configuration or the sites that we work on all of our development machines, but then also in production. Our clients are usually international organizations and institutions, and they need fast delivery, so we work usually not just one person, but the whole team on a project, and we need to make the updates fast and safe. Mutable has pioneered the code-driven development practice, which was in Drupal 6 and 7 times something that you had to teach people, and now it's in Drupal 8 core, so it's a big success that the community has embraced this. The chapter 1, can I deploy configuration? And this is the core use case. It's you have a site on your development instance, and you want to push it to production. And essentially the configuration from the development to the configuration from production. And the configuration management of Drupal core does this, and it's one of the, in my opinion, the most important features that Drupal 8 has. And it's a new and pretty complete solution. And the reference use case is what I just described before. So there's a couple of steps. I will go through them. This is very basic, and I'm sure if you worked with Drupal 8, you've already seen this. It works both on the command line and from the user interface. So the first step is to install the site, make a full backup with the database and the files, and clone this production backup to your development environment, or the other way around. The important part is that you make a clone of the database, of the files, everything. We'll get to how that can be avoided in a next scenario. Then your live site works, and new users, new content, and so on. And you make changes on development in the different environment. Bear in mind, this is the same site, different environments. Okay. Then you export the configuration. You can do that with the drush config export, or also with the UI. You can download the tarball. Then you commit it to Git, or you version it somehow. You add it to some system to transfer the files. You stage the configuration, so on the production you pull the changes. Meanwhile, on development, you can continue working on the next release. You can review the changes. So if you do that with Drush, there's Drush config import preview. You can also go to the UI and see a nice overview of what changed. And then finally, you apply the changes. And so on the UI, you click import. On Drush, you just run Drush config import. And that's it. So you pull the code and the configuration from your master branch. You run the update hooks, and you import the configuration. And the order is important because the update hooks basically assure that your site runs in a stable condition, so that your database is up to date with your code. And when you do config import, then your site needs to work normally. We will see later what happens if you have content. So this solves a big problem that Drupal 7 couldn't solve. And it works perfectly for this use case. But this reference use case is pretty narrow. We can all imagine many cases where you want to do something extra. And you remember in the first step, you cloned this database dump, and we want to get rid of that, right? Chapter 2, can I install from existing configuration? So this idea is that you have your site, including the configuration, and you install it, not from scratch, but from this configuration that you previously exported. And the answer is yes, with config installer. So this is for both the first time you run it and also for several developers who want to use, you know, if they come in later, they don't want to revert to like the first dump that the first person did when installing the project. And the config installer, when installs the existing site, it's important to realize that usually when you run the Drupal installer and you click install, then a new site gets generated. Even if you install a profile, then you just install a new instance of that profile. You create a new site based on that profile. Because in Drupal 8, the site owns the configuration and not the modules or not the profile, the site. And the site has a UUID, and Drupal will not allow you to import configuration from another site. It has to be the same site in different environments. But the config installer allows you to install a previous site, so the existing site with all its configuration. It is a profile as such, but it's not really a profile. It's a pseudo profile, as so to say, because it's a contrib project and it's maintained by Alex Pott, so the core maintainer also for the configuration system. And in my opinion, it should be in core and it should run on, everybody should use this. So basically when you install it, you have this nice UI, and you can either upload the tarball that you can download from the other side, or you can directly put in the synchronization directory, and if it's populated with all the YAML files from your configuration, then it will install this site. Of course, if you upload the tarball, it has to be empty and writable. So. But the way we usually do is we just give it the directory where everything is already there, and it installs, and everything is nice. There's an issue to put it in core. It's not there yet, but the people are working on it. And it's a good place to help out as well, but it's not very easy. The next chapter, can I override local configuration? So we just talked about how you deploy configuration, and it's important to know that it's always the whole configuration. It's everything. So the whole, everything what is considered configuration, you transfer between the environments. But sometimes you want to have, for example, the verbose error logging enabled on development, but not on production, or you want to have API keys on production that you don't want to put in version control. So you have to like override them in a way. You have to make it more special and kind of get outside of this configuration deployment. And you can do that with core alone, and it's called overriding. And when you override things, the overrides are not exported into the configuration. They're runtime overrides, and you put them in the config variable in settings.php, or anything else that you include, like the settings.local.php. And you would, for example, the verbose error logging, you would enable it like this. This is an example that comes straight from this, this file. And that overrides the error logging. So in the configuration that you deploy, it says the error level should be none, or it should not display any error. It should just say there's an error and not the whole stack trace, and verbose is on your local machine. So when you go back to the admin screen and you go to this form, in this case the admin config development logging, it shows you that none is selected, even though it actually shows you all the errors. And this is wanted because Drupal prevents you from submitting overridden configuration. So you can still change the configuration, which is then exported, but the one that's actually effective is the one from your overrides, from your settings.php. This can create some confusion, especially if you have clients and you override settings in settings.php, and they see the form and they change stuff and it doesn't work because it actually uses the overrides. So the overrides should be used in cases where it makes sense, and like in use with caution as well. There's also an issue to make this a little bit better so that it would give you a warning when something is overwritten. Or some contrib modules detect whether it's overwritten and gray it out, but it's also not very obvious to know whether it's really overwritten or not, because if it's the same value, then and you just get the configuration from the system, and you don't know. So when you use drush config export, you get still the original one, and that way Drupal doesn't bleed the overrides into the exported configuration. In this chapter, it's also important to have this concept in mind of mutable and immutable configuration, especially if you work with the API and you code in PHP. You can get the normal configuration, like system.site, and it will be immutable like that, and it will include all the overrides that happen. Bear in mind that the language system also uses the override system to translate the configuration. But in a form, for example, when you want to save the configuration, you need to have the bare configuration that is in the file, and for that you get the mutable configuration. Of course, you should not use it directly like this. You should always use dependency injection and not the global services, right? You know that. Okay. Then you get the mutable configuration, which does not contain the overrides, but it allows you to save the configuration. If you get the immutable one and you try to save on this config object, then it will give you an error, and it will not allow you to do that. Well, obviously, because it does contain the overwritten configuration, and it prevents you from saving the overrides as the real thing. If you want to use this config variable, then it's really fairly easy to do that. All you do is you change it, and then you diff the export, or you see it in the UI, and you see here the system.logging, this file has been changed. And then you see in config, you have the system.logging. This is essentially the file name or the name of the configuration object. And then you give the value that you want to override, and you set it to whatever you need it to be. This works for all the configuration. It's very nice. Is this a satisfactory solution? For a lot of cases, this is perfect, but it has its limitations as well. Namely, you can only alter existing configuration. You cannot use this trick to add new configuration. You can only change it, but you cannot completely unset something. And you can't override, for example, which modules are installed on your site like this. Even though the list of enabled modules is also configuration, but which modules are installed on your site is compiled into the dependency injection container, and you can't just override that on the fly. And for example, you can also not override the color of Bartik, which is very funny, but if you look at the code, there's a comment on it. It's like, yeah, the color is getting compiled in CSS anyway, so we don't bother. you cannot override it. But yeah, and then there's other things that you can't override like that, like edge cases, or also for contrib modules. Some don't play nice with this, but for most cases where you would want to do that, it's possible. So I just said you can't stop modules from being installed or not installed with this. So how can you exclude modules from getting deployed? I always said you exclude the whole configuration, and which modules are installed on the site is part of this configuration. So the typical example for this is devel. You want to have devel on your local machine, but not on production. And there is a couple of different methods on how you can do that. The first method is with Drush. Drush has an option when you do the import and export commands. It's called skip modules. But it only skips, it removes the module from the core extensions file. It will still import or try to export, or it will still export and try to import the configuration for devel. So if you use this, you have to git ignore the configuration that for devel manually. You have to know which one is which. There's another method called Drush CMI tools, which provides another Drush command where you can give it an ignore list, where you can basically list a set of configuration that you want to ignore. It's an extension of the first option. And then finally there's a third option, which is yet a more complete extension of it. It's a module called configuration split, which I maintain. It's relatively new, and I have to admit that the user interface is not exactly most user-friendly, but it works really well. And it is it's a configuration override on the import and on the export time. So rather than the config variable, where you override the configuration while the site is loading, you override the configuration while you import it. And you filter the configuration that you export. So there's a configuration object or a configuration entity called a split. And you can specify which modules that you want to split off or exclude. And you can also specify a list of configuration that you want to exclude. Or you can also even, it's called gray list for the moment. It's a kind of an ignore way. So if it's there, it will stay there. If it's not there, it will not create it. And the blacklist removes it from the configuration, and it saves it in a separate directory. So you have usually your config sync directory, and you can also have next to it the config def or something like that. And then this split will contain which modules were enabled for this split and all the configuration that depend on these modules. And that way, they will not get deployed because on the production you will just do config import, and since they're in a different directory, they will not be part of the import. It has both a drush and a Drupal console command. The Drupal console command currently doesn't work because they released a new release candidate and they haven't ported it to the new way of doing things. But that's my goal for this weekend. And of course, because it's configuration entities, these splits can be overwritten by the config variable. So if your head is not blown yet, then maybe you can also split off itself, and there's many really fun things you can do with this. But the use cases really do not have to deploy development modules. So this is the user interface that I talked about. This is with another module called Chosen, which makes this nice select boxes. Without it, it looks even worse. But this is how you would, for example, configure it for devel. If you want to ignore devel, you select devel from the modules that you want to filter out. You also add the system.menu.devel because that's a configuration for the menu, which does not depend on devel. So if you uninstall devel, this one will get uninstalled in the uninstall hook of devel. But since we're not doing any uninstall, but just filtering out, you need to do it separately. And we can also have, for example, a development view that we just want to keep for ourselves. And the gray list here is for the cron settings. The cron settings, obviously, we want to have there. But this one, we have our own development cron settings. And with this, it's not a runtime override, but a config import override. So while our system is using this, it will use the specified value and not the one that is in the file. And when you export it, it will leave the file alone and set our one that we have in the system in the separate directory. So far, so good, right? Okay. So now it's another interesting topic. How can I work in parallel with a colleague? When you have two or more developers working simultaneously on the same project, how do you ensure that none of the work is lost? Can you assume that Git will always do the right thing when you merge things? Again, when you import configuration, then whatever is on your site is replaced by whatever you import. When you export configuration, everything that's in your folder will be replaced by what is on your site. So you need to think about it and make sure you do it the right way. Luckily, Git is really great. There's other version control systems too, but Drupal uses Git, and Git is awesome. So I can only recommend using Git. Then in this case, we don't consider multiple instances, but only the same site that we have in the different environments, and the different environment could also be the second developer's laptop. Well, Drupal 8 exports configuration as text files, which is what Git loves. So we have a Git workflow for it. So when you work as a team of developers, you share the Git repository for the code and configuration, and you install the site from the existing configuration with config installer, and you adopt a successful Git branching model. If you look that up on Google, you will find examples for it. So the first developer installs the site, exports the configuration, and commits and pushes to the Git repository. And everybody else clones the code, installs it with config installer, and has the site that is essentially the same as the first developer has. Then you check out the branch, you commit and push, and everybody does the same. And of course, branching is easy, but then when you merge, it gets difficult and sometimes dangerous or problematic. And there's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind to do in the right order to be on the safe side. And we will see a couple of interesting situations. So if you don't do it in the right order, or if you're not careful, you can lose all the uncommitted work. You can accidentally override work that has been done by others without really noticing. And it can happen that the configuration looks okay at first, but then Drupal doesn't want to import it anymore. And we will see a nice example of that. So this is the safe sequence. You always export the configuration, you commit it, and then you merge or pull. You import the configuration, and then you push it. And do it in this order, and not in another order. We will see in a moment what can go wrong if you don't do it in this order. So, if you import before you export, that only sucks for you, because you just wipe out everything you did since the previous time you imported it. And there's no backup. If you do drush tim y, and you realize too late and you hit the enter button, there is no going back. There is no backup, it just sucks for you. But usually you do that very often, and if that happens to you, then you have not lost too much of your work. So you can import and export the configuration very frequently, and it will all be good. Get a coffee and do it again. And do it in the right order next time. If you merge before you export, then everything works. And you just override what has been there with what is in you don't actually merge. If you git merge and then you export, you override what your colleagues have been doing. Luckily, this can be solved with Git. You can undo this, and you can try to find out, you can do Git history, and you can merge it correctly. But if you just follow the right order, everything will be fine, and you will not have to deal with it. If you merge before you commit, then maybe there's conflicts, and you will have some manual labors to find out, because the conflicting files you cannot just import again. to make sure that they work. So you have to actually fix them first and then see if it works. And if you forget to import, you're again in the same place as before. Because if you don't import it, then you don't get the work from others into your system, and you don't continue with the merged version that you have in your files, but you just continue to work with what you had before. So you always need to import it before continuing to work. So far, so good, right? Yes, good. What's the time? All right. So now I was promising you how you can break your configuration with Git. And it's very simple. You install the standard profile. Developer A branches and deletes the tags from the article content type, which results in 2 files being removed, the file storage and the field storage and the field instance. Developer B on the same adds the tags to the basic page, which results in 1 file being added, the file instance. If you merge these 2 branches, Git will happily do that because actually completely separate files have been changed. But the resulting configuration is invalid because the tag now has an instance but no storage. And Drupal will complain about it and not allow you to import it anymore. And then you will have to fix it manually again and find out what happened. But if you do that in rather small chunks of features, it's not really a problem. And if you communicate well with your team, then this never happens. Or it could happen, but it's very rare. And you need to want to do this. It's usually not something that happens by accident. Another use case is reusing configuration, and a lot of you who have been using Drupal 7 know features. Features also exist for Drupal 8, but it has a completely new use case, or it has the use case it had before everybody abused it. And it's a configuration packager. And the use case is to take a piece of functionality from one site and use it on another site. So 2 different projects. If you have only 1 project, you will not need features. It is now a development module specifically. It advertises itself as a development module, and you don't need to have features enabled to make a feature work. And you use features on a different level. So you use features on your development machine and not on production. You use the configuration management to move the configuration between the different instances of the same site. That I already said. There's also a features UI module now. They were really happy with the configuration management, and it allowed them to make even new functionality to automatically detect which features or which functionality belongs together and so on. For example, there is automatic bundling of things that kind of belong together. And yeah, if you're using features to deploy your configuration, you are doing it wrong. Really, I mean, use it for different sites, and if you somehow come up with this, yeah, but it's almost, yeah, nobody's stopping you from, coding on the live side either. I mean, it's something you don't do, and it's the same with features. You can use features on your production site in Drupal 8, but you shouldn't. It has a stable release now. It's 8.3.1, I believe. But there's still some gaps. For example, menu links needs a separate module that treats them, and permissions are not exportable the same way as they were in Drupal 7, because the permissions are part of the user role, and you cannot just mangle them out in a good way. So there's an issue that says won't fix. But yeah, maybe there will be another solution that can be found for making this work nicely. Now, a situation that can happen. You have this very nice workflow, you're great friends with all your colleagues and everything works nicely. And you have a client that messes with the configuration of your site. So you have everything, and overnight your client changes something, and when you deploy the new configuration, all his changes are gone. And the next morning he calls you and says, oh, but I changed this super important block title, or or block placement rather, and he's very unhappy. So there's a couple of options on how to deal with this. The first option is lock configuration on production. There's a module called config read only, which allows you to precisely do that. You can enable it, and then in settings.php you set it to the lock to be on, and all the configuration forms will now error out when you try to submit them. And this is a good solution if you have other ways of making your client happy. But in some situations, you cannot do that. You cannot completely turn off the configuration on the production. So the other option is you treat the client as a developer, and you merge the live or the production configuration into your workflow before you deploy it. And then you have just a small window in between you exporting the configuration and merging and deploying. And maybe you can use config read only in that time to be extra safe. And a third option is again the configuration split. This is another use case for this module. You make a new split for the client, and you split off all the configuration the client works on. And in that way, the client's configuration goes in a separate folder that is not part of what you usually deploy, and it gets merged in as you deploy. So the client's configuration is not lost, it's just saved in a separate folder. And if you want, you can then use that folder to get it back into your development cycle if you want to make sure the developers also get the client's configuration. Of course, then you use the config split import and config split export. And with a patch that I'm working on right now for this module, it will also be possible to have several splits at the same time, and then only have some of them active when you import. And that will get rid of a lot of headaches that you might currently have with this. Can I deploy content with my configuration? You know, sometimes you have a view that depends on a taxonomy term, or you have default content. And the scenario is you want to have some content that comes with your configuration, like essentially blocks usually, or taxonomy terms. And the problem is that content is not exported together with configuration. Configuration is really the configuration only, and it's not state, and it's not content. These are all different things. For people who are not sure, the state is also something that you should look up. It's not content, it's also not configuration, but it's, for example, when the cron was run last time. Drupal needs to maintain this information, and cache is something that is complicated to calculate, and then needs to be served fast. So to get the terminology correct. So the option one is you handle a missing content event when you import configuration, and that depends on content. then this event is fired, and you can catch it and create the content that is missing. Or you can do that, for example, with an event subscriber for it. And if you do nothing, then Drupal also implements it and just continues. And then if you deploy block placement, but the block is not there, it will show you a warning that something went wrong. The option 2 is use the default content module. When you install a module, it can have a content. So module in the modules folder, there is a content folder, and there you can have nodes or taxonomy terms. And it's a JSON format with HAL JSON from core, and it uses the UUID to detect which one it is, and it just dumps everything as REST would do, essentially. And then you just import it manually in this event, for example, from the previous option, or you run it later. So that is how it could look like, for example. So you have like this huge JSON in all of these files. The third option is to use deploy. Deploy is a very good suite of modules. They do a lot of things. It's really something that you should consider looking up. There is also the workflow initiative that tries to get at least parts of this into core. And it will have everything revisionable, and there's also a trash module, I think, that you can undo node deletions. There's great work being done there. And finally, there is a hook that is kind of a post-update hook that you can use, and that is run after all of the update hooks are run. So when core uses it when the block system changed, and they changed the way the blocks work, and then saved all the blocks in some other table, and then used this, because this runs when all the update hooks are done, and therefore the state of the Drupal is back to normal, and the database can be used as normal. And then you can do the content manipulation there. And this, yeah. Here's a list of related modules. So the config installer I mentioned, the config read-only I also mentioned to lock the configuration changes via the UI. Config update reports changes between the configuration that the module came with and the configuration that's active on your site. This is interesting if you're developing modules that you want to contribute, or features. Actually, features depends on it. Config devel helps with developing configuration. There's a couple of tools in it. Configuration split is the import and export override, the one I was talking about before. Config tools has an option that you can automatically commit every change that you make on the UI. So you save a form, and it automatically commits it to Git or exports it to a folder. Features I've touched on before. And config sync provides methods for safely importing site configuration from updated modules and themes. This goes together with the config update in a way. So you can, when the module changes and has new configuration, it gives you this way to import it again. So that's it. If you have questions, feel free. Thank you for your time. Oh, yeah.
Going back to slide with, it seems easy to mess up during development. There was
This one, or?
Yeah. Mention manual labor. No.
Yes.
So step 3, merge before commit and manual labor
Yes.
as a result. But if we make a commit and then merge, we still have this.
Yes. Yes. But the thing is, if you commit first, then you always have a state to go back to, because if you commit it, then you know this commit was the state that worked, and you know you're safe. You can always go back to that.
Just a backup plan.
Yes, it's a backup plan, and if you don't have the backup plan, then you have something that you cannot import anymore, and you have to fix it, and you cannot double check something, or yeah. Other questions? Yes. So you have to speak up louder. So sorry.
You have any experience, for example, to import to install with you have the configuration installed of profile?
With Drush?
Yes.
Yes, it works also with Drush.
With another language? With another language? Other English, another language?
With another language?
With another language?
Yes, with the multilingual site. Yes, the config installer installs the site, but misses the languages. That's true. And what you do then is, after you install the site, you just import the configuration again with all the languages, and then it will work. So there is a bug in config installer with the multilingual issues. But you can just install it, and you will have a site that works, and then you just import the configuration again as soon as you install the site. So it's one step more, but it still works.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Exporting custom blocks. So if you do a custom block and export it and import it on another site, you'll get the broken handler there.
Yes, because blocks are content and not configuration.
But,
yes.
If you do it like this, you'll have to do some workaround to get this to work because of different UID.
Yeah, this is one of the workarounds, workaround. This is a way of doing it. Or you...
this will be default, right? If you import it, it will be like, oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so while you import it, the importer fires this event. And then you have an event subscriber that deals with it, and you create the block that you expect. So usually what we do in our projects is we have a folder with the default content, and then when we export or when we import the configuration, we also, we usually don't do it like this, but we just, after the configuration has been imported, we also import the default content, or the content that is new then. Like we have the block exported.
So you'll have the block in layout, and it will show.
Yeah, it will show the broken. It will show that the block is missing. It will be the broken handler, and so you just on your development side you export this content. You export here it's a node, but you can also export blocks in a REST format or in a JSON format via REST, and then you just use REST to create the content again.
So you would do that in a post update?
For example, yes, exactly. Yes. Yes. No? Thank you very much.